What if I told you that Jim Jones, one of the most controversial personalities in contemporary hip-hop and entertainment, suddenly broke down on live television, revealing a side of himself that no one ever anticipated? The world was astonished when Jim Jones, a Harlem great known for his fearless demeanor and larger-than-life presence, revealed his mental health issues in an honest and unvarnished confession. Difficulties, his fight with anxiety, and how the demands of his work almost drove him to despair. But this wasn't simply another famous person discussing their difficulties. It was a declaration that Jim Jones is no stranger to the limelight. As a founding member of the legendary group Dipset, he has been at the forefront of hip-hop for years, making even his closest supporters take a back seat. Though Jim's name is synonymous with success due to his chart-topping tunes and history in both music and fashion, there is a side to his flamboyant persona, gaudy chains, and arrogance. Jim Jones, who is rarely seen by fans, recently opened himself in a way that many people did not anticipate during a live broadcast. The rapper and businessman revealed his issues with mental health. What prompted Jim to finally come up, and why did this moment feel so much more momentous, given that his journey through stardom has frequently been characterized by fear, tension, and a deep internal conflict? Instead of a standard celebrity confession, we'll explain in today's video why Jim Jones was so vulnerable, what he revealed, and what it means for his fans, his future, and the wider discussion around mental health in the hip-hop culture. This isn't merely a celebrity sharing their story. It's a potent moment of introspection that has the potential to spark a movement of change. You'll discover at the end of this video the personal struggles Jim Jones has had throughout his career, how the demands of public attention and celebrity affected his mental health, and why Jim chose to sharing his hardships was a revolutionary step for him and hip-hop, and the public and fans can learn from his openness. Jim Jones, whose real name is Joseph Guillermo Jones II, has long been recognized as a prominent member of the Harlem-based rap collective known as the Diplomats. He rose to prominence in East Coast hip-hop due to his audacious demeanor and self-assuredness. He's not an addition to being a rapper. Jim is also an entrepreneur, a significant figure in street fashion, and a member of a cultural movement that shaped the early 2000s. However, beneath the loud sounds is a more significant life, appearance, and the witty lyrics. There has always been a backstory that few people are aware of. Jim Jones has long presented himself as the embodiment of toughness, a man who has overcome all obstacles and triumphed. His public persona was based on his belief that he was invincible and would not succumb to pressure. However, was this perception always true, or was it a skillfully constructed one, built to shield him from the vulnerability he was too scared to confront? The problem with Jim Jones' public persona is that it's exaggerated, yet occasionally even Jim's mental health issues caused his toughest defenses to crumble, and this realization didn't come to him suddenly. He felt pressured to keep up his reputation and keep releasing hits in order to live up to the demands of popularity come with scrutiny, and it's easy to understand the emotional struggles someone like Jim may experience due to the pressures of ruling the hip-hop industry, judgment and expectations that can often feel intolerable. Yet as we frequently observe in the entertainment industry, celebrities' private lives are frequently concealed beneath their public personas. Jim's everything changed when he made a confession on live television. He came out of hiding and showed a side that wasn't limited by the tough, streetwise persona he had spent so many years cultivating. The mental toll that such a lifestyle takes isn't always easy, but Jim Jones, like many other successful celebrities, had to deal with the enormous demands that come with celebrity for years. From the outside, the pressure to always be at the top in order to create hits, stay relevant, and satisfy fans and the media's demands can be quite taxing on anyone. Even the most seasoned. Jim's career took off in the early 2000s, and the spotlight followed him everywhere. However, his quick ascent to stardom came with a lot of obligations, expectations, and regretfully, criticism and admiration can be harsh, especially for someone who has established a reputation as a strong, no-nonsense person in the field of hip-hop. However, frequently conceals a more profound truth that many fans and outsiders are unaware of. The strain to uphold the image of an unbreakable legend can result. Jim had feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and a deep-seated fear of failing. This pressure increased until even his self-assurance and confidence were insufficient to protect him from Jim's struggles with mental health, which were not generally publicized until lately, were a result of the excessive stress he had been dealing with in private for years. In his admissions, he disclosed the psychological toll that his profession had placed on him, including the restless nights, the worry about his legacy, and the internal drive to always push boundaries. Jim Jones was a person, not just a brand. Not just a rapper, but a human being navigating the very real emotions that he experienced while remaining loyal to his roots, even though people adored his bold approach. Hip-hop rarely discusses the loneliness that may come with being famous, the intense pressure to stay on top, and the never-ending need to be flawless. But Jim decided to speak up, and by doing so, he started a vital discussion on mental health in the entertainment sector. It's difficult to understand the ongoing mental burden of attempting to juggle being a family guy, an entrepreneur, and one of the most prominent people in hip-hop. In a moment that stunned fans, and Jim Jones decided to share his inner turmoil with his peers in a live broadcast. It wasn't a staged event or a part of a bigger marketing campaign. Rather, it was an honest, his candid and spontaneous admission, which fundamentally altered his public persona, focused on a subject that is frequently disregarded in the entertainment sector: mental health. Jim had long been regarded as a prominent personality in hip-hop, the epitome of streetwise behavior, and the head of the Diplomats stationed in Harlem. However, as he revealed his vulnerabilities, he transformed into a figure of bravery. Jim talked candidly about feeling constrained by his own achievements and how the pressure of expectations started to undermine his tranquility. His mental health had begun to suffer due to the demands of the profession, the pressure to be flawless, and the ongoing need to prove himself. What was so remarkable about his confession was the degree of openness and honesty with which Jim talked, and he didn't hide the fact that, in spite of all of his accomplishments, he occasionally had second thoughts out of concern for whether he could continue the act. It was a pivotal moment for Jim and the hip-hop community as a whole. For a long time, mental health has been a taboo topic in the rap industry, particularly among men who are typically expected to persevere. Entertainment is frequently minimized, disregarded, or vilified. Jim's choice to face his difficulties head-on was revolutionary. In this way, it dismantled the boundaries of what was appropriate to discuss in public and delivered a strong message to anyone who could be going through similar difficulties. Jim's collapse, despite being surrounded by people he talked about the loneliness that frequently comes with fame, and acknowledged the pressures that many of his followers didn't perceive. He also disclosed how anxious and doubtful persistent companions, even when everything appeared to be ideal. He acknowledged that there were times when he wondered if he could live on and if it was all worth it. Jim's candor during this live broadcast is what made his confession so shocking. Whether it was due to the hype or if he was just worn out from the never-ending struggle to keep up a perfect public image. He wasn't trying to sell a new album or gain more followers. He wasn't performing for the cameras. He was just a man dealing with the mental health issues that millions of people encounter on a daily basis. This instance of vulnerability was uncommon in the entertainment sector and even more uncommon in the hip-hop community, where displaying weakness has frequently been associated with failure. Jim was a trailblazer in the days following Jim Jones's stunning live performance, changing the discourse on mental health in hip-hop culture and paving the way for other musicians to follow suit. Confession. The public's response was intense. It was the kind of incident that had an impact on social media, the entertainment sector, and even mental health activism. The rapper's vulnerability and how it affected their opinions of him were widely discussed by fans, other celebrities, and critics. On the one hand, the outpouring of support was huge. Numbers of fans expressed their love and encouragement on social media, with many viewing Jim's readiness to talk candidly about his difficulties as an act of one fan tweeted, "Bravery. I never expected this from Jim Jones, but I'm proud of him for opening up about something so many of us go through in silence." Others had their own stories to offer, explaining how they felt less alone in their own struggles with mental health because of Jim's revelation, and it was evident that his bravery was encouraging others to face their own inner demons in the same way that Jim had. However, despite the overwhelming support, not everyone agreed with Jim's disclosure. Some questioned the timing of the confession, claiming that Jim was abusing his mental health issues as a means of garnering sympathy or attention, particularly given the timing he was set to release new music and go on a significant tour. This critique wasn't unusual in the world of celebrities, where motives are frequently examined and every action is analyzed for ulterior motives. For some, the question was whether this was really about Jim's welfare, or despite these accusations, Jim's revelation had a profound impact that extended well beyond the hip-hop community. Was it just another attempt to remain relevant in a field that has a tendency to forget its stars? Advocates and health organizations saw the occasion as a chance to further the discussion around mental health in marginalized communities, particularly in the Black community, where since mental health issues are frequently disregarded or stigmatized, Jim's story became a symbol of change that sparked fresh discussions on the emotional toll of constant public scrutiny and the demands of celebrity scrutiny and the necessity of providing musicians with better mental health treatment. One significant element of this fallout was the impact Jim's confession had on his relationships with his hip-hop colleagues. Rappers, producers, and other industry professionals who may have been reluctant to talk about their personal hardships began to do so. In interviews, several admitted that they had also struggled with mental health conditions, but had concealed it out of concern for their reputations or careers. Jim's courage served as a catalyst, demonstrating to them that it was acceptable to be vulnerable without losing credibility. After Jim's confession, artists like Waka Flocka Flame and even Jay-Z discussed their own issues with mental health, shattering long-standing hip-hop taboos. Jim's own metamorphosis was arguably the most important part of this post-confession era, but the initial reaction from peers and fans was harsh. After the cameras stopped rolling, Jim's true journey started. In the days and weeks after his confession, he started to really focus on his mental health. This wasn't simply about taking the required actions to heal was the focus of this public moment of vulnerability. Jim acknowledged in interviews that disclosing his difficulties on such a big stage was, "I thought I could handle everything on my own." Jim continued, "But there's power in talking." This was just the first step before he started seeking therapy. To someone who can help you deal with anything you couldn't handle on your own. He also started to promote treatment and mental health awareness in interviews, inspiring other males, particularly those in the hip-hop business, to emulate him. It became evident that his road towards better mental health wasn't a one-time event, but rather a sustained dedication to well-being and bringing attention to those who might be experiencing hidden difficulties. But even with his increased candor regarding his mental health, Jim still had difficulties. There were times when, as he went through therapy and the recovery process, he experienced self-doubt and difficulties. The demands of celebrity and the ongoing media scrutiny Jim ever experienced persisted. That, although the burden of everything sometimes felt too much to bear on some days, he now had the coping mechanisms and a solid support network. But there's where the story becomes intriguing. Jim's fragility did not shield him from criticism or the harsh realities of celebrity, despite all the progress he made. In fact, some conjectured that his admittance of mental health issues sparked a new phase of criticism in his career. Was he now perceived as a weak rapper unable of handling the strain, or was he a stronger version of Jim Jones? After Jim Jones's emotional confession, a new chapter in his life emerged, one that was far from ideal. Who had the courage to be himself, flaws and all. Simple but characterized by development, transformation, and surprising insights. His path to recovery and atonement was anything but straight. It was a convoluted one filled with hiccups and detours, but it was also evidence of the human spirit's tenacity. Following his live confession, Jim's followers and the media were curious about what he would do next. Would he continue to demonstrate? The Jim clarified quickly whether he would show the world his weak side or revert to the self-assured, larger-than-life rapper persona that people were more accustomed to. Interestingly, his commitment to self-improvement extended beyond his mental health. His confession led to a more thorough examination of every facet of his life. From his Jim was open about his personal relationships to his professional career, including the difficulties he had previously had, which many of his admirers were unaware of. For many years, I believed that I had to be this hardcore because of the poisonous connections that had created his attitude, especially the pressures of maintaining a tough guy reputation throughout his career. Jim said in an interview, "Untouchable. Dude, but I was falling apart inside and I didn't even know how to express that." For Jim, this change in perspective didn't happen quickly. It took to explore his past in depth, something he had evaded for years. But with the aid of therapy, self-reflection, and time spent alone away from the spotlight, Jim started to comprehend the causes of his mental problems. He began addressing the emotional baggage of his early years, the stress of growing up in a turbulent environment, and the grief from his childhood. In Jim was more than just a rapper or a star. He was a man who had lived As he began to talk about his background, fans saw a side of him that they had never seen before, through actual adversity, which helped him become more relatable to many, particularly those who had gone through similar things in their own life. His readiness to be open about his difficulties allowed his one of the most important turning moments in Jim's healing process was when he started to show his followers the humanity behind his gruff demeanor, fostering a stronger connection than previously. Concentrate not only on his personal difficulties but also on how he could support others. He understood that his job provided him with a forum to discuss mental health concerns, and Jim decided not to waste it and began giving speeches at mental health gatherings, collaborating with groups that aim to increase awareness and offer assistance to people who were struggling with. Jim became a symbol of change by his actions. He wasn't simply the man who had openly acknowledged his mental health issues on a live broadcast. He was someone who actively working on himself and demonstrating to the world that even the most seasoned public people could improve. He became an outspoken supporter of the value of therapy, emotional expression, and eliminating the stigma associated with mental health in the hip-hop scene. But Jim's path wasn't without obstacles. Even with his renewed sense of purpose, there were times when he frequently talked about how easy it was to revert to old behaviors, self-doubt, insecurity, and the urge to appear indestructible. These times tested his resolve, his perseverance, but each time Jim confronted them using the skills he had acquired from therapy and the encouragement of his supporters and loved ones, it was evident that even though Jim's road to recovery was still ongoing, had made great progress in his personal life, and Jim's relationships also started to become better. By being open about his difficulties, he was able to establish deeper connections with those closest to him. Including his long-term girlfriend, Jim was able to create more genuine and robust relationships by sharing how he no longer had to conceal his vulnerabilities, had been there for him during the process, and how their relationship had become stronger as they both went through this difficult time together. However, the path to recovery didn't only transform Jim's personal life. It also had a significant impact on Jim's career and music. As he accepted his vulnerability, it began to show in his songs. His lyrics grew more reflective, and his themes more genuine. Fans started to observe the change and commend Jim for his development as a person and an artist. His latest song, which once more turned into more relevant and relatable, resonated deeper connection with fans. They weren't simply enjoying a rapper's music, they were listening to a man's reflections who had worked in the shadowiest areas of his head and came out stronger. And Jim started to describe in the interviews how mental health issues had affected his method of creation. The music I'm nothing is more real than making now. I have done it before. That's not just, he said, no longer about the party songs. It's regarding the difficulties I've encountered and the development I've experienced. Fans, and the change was noticed by both critics and in his voice, which was unvarnished, honest, and Jim was no longer attempting to fulfill the requirements of the business. He was just being himself. But this is where the intriguing part began. Jim's accomplishment of accepting his vulnerability was more than a personal trait. Triumph, it turned into a hip-hop moment. Overall,